I was half asleep, the afternoon light folding into my room like it didn't want to be here either when the knock came. Not the kind of knock you answer right away. Soft, careful, almost testing if I was home. I opened the door, and there she was, leaning lightly on the frame, hair catching the sunlight in strands that looked like they'd been brushed by the day itself. Her eyes met mine with that steady, unflinching kind of look that makes you suddenly aware of how messy your shirt is. "You left something," she said, holding out a folded piece of paper. Then she paused, just long enough for her lips to press together. "Or maybe you meant to." I stared at the paper in her hand, but it was impossible to ignore the way her fingers were curled around it, like it was more than just paper. My voice caught, and I cleared my throat. "Where was it?" "In the hallway. By the stairs." She tilted her head slightly, eyes not quite leaving mine, but also not locking in. A kind of hover. "It has your name." I should have taken it from her then, but I didn't. My hand stayed at my side. I think I was waiting for her to say something else. We'd only spoken a handful of times before. Passing moments. She lived 2 floors up, always with a book tucked under her arm or groceries in hand. Always a faint smile if our eyes met, but one that disappeared the second you looked too long. Her voice was warm, but there was something underneath it, something measured, like she'd learned not to let her words run too far ahead of her thoughts. "You want to come in?" I asked before I knew if I meant it. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough for me to notice. Then she stepped inside, slow, like she was testing the floor. The air felt different with her in the room. Not heavier, more like it was holding its breath. She glanced around, her eyes catching on the unmade bed, the coffee mug still half full on the desk, the open notebook with my handwriting spilling across the page. She didn't say anything about it, but the corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. I reached for the paper. Her hand brushed mine as she passed it over, and I felt the smallest pulse of heat, like static that lingers. "You should keep it somewhere safer," she said. Her tone was even, but there was an edge to it, the kind that makes you wonder if she's talking about more than the paper. I unfolded it. It wasn't mine. No name. Just a short line, written in neat, careful handwriting. "Some things find you when you're ready." Instead, she just said, "Maybe it still is." The silence between us was full, like it had weight. I could hear the clock ticking somewhere down the hall. And then, the sharp chime of my phone. I glanced at the screen, and my chest tightened. A name I hadn't seen in months. When I looked back at her, her eyes were still on me, steady, unreadable. The message still sat on my phone screen, unread. I flipped it over so the light from it wouldn't give anything away. She didn't ask. She just sat on the edge of the chair by my desk, her hands resting lightly on her knees, like she was deciding how long she could stay before it became something else. Her presence filled the room in a way that was both comfortable and uncomfortable. Comfortable because she didn't demand anything from me. Uncomfortable because I wanted something from her, and I wasn't ready to admit it. "You've been here long?" she asked, glancing toward the window where the late sun pushed shadows across the wall. 6 months, I said. "Feels longer." She smiled faintly, though not at me, more at something inside her head. "I've been in this building 12 years. Same view, same creaky stairs, same neighbors." Same neighbors lingered in the air. I wondered how many people had sat in this chair before me. I asked her about her job, and she answered in short sentences. "A teacher. High school English. Mostly teenagers who think they're already grown," she said, looking at me with the kind of half-smile that could have been a joke or a warning. There was a photo in her wallet that I'd seen once in passing. A girl maybe my age, maybe younger. Her daughter. She hadn't mentioned her today, and I didn't ask. But the thought sat there anyway, making the air feel thinner. The first time I noticed her, it was in the stairwell. She was carrying 2 grocery bags, struggling with the door. I'd held it open. She'd said thank you without looking at me. That was before I realized she was someone I'd think about in the quiet moments before sleep. Now, sitting here, she kept adjusting her position, crossing one leg, then uncrossing it, as if she couldn't quite find the spot that let her guard down. "You read?" she asked suddenly, nodding toward my notebook on the desk. "Sometimes," I said, though we both knew it was more than sometimes. She leaned forward, resting her elbow on her knee. You should keep doing it. Most people, they stop when they think no one's paying attention. There was something in her voice, a trace of regret. Maybe. I wanted to ask her what she'd stopped doing. Instead, I said, "And what about you?" Her eyes flickered to the window, then back. Some things are harder to start again. Silence. Not awkward, but deliberate. I noticed the light catching on the thin chain around her neck. She reached for it absent-mindedly, rubbing it between her fingers. I wondered who had given it to her, and if they still mattered. When she stood, I thought she was leaving. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of coffee on her breath. Her hand brushed my forearm. Light, almost nothing, but it stayed there half a second longer than necessary. She didn't look at me when she pulled away 2 nights later. I saw her again. Not in my room this time, in the lobby. She was leaning against the counter, keys in one hand, phone in the other. When she noticed me, her eyes softened, then flicked quickly toward the glass door. A man was standing outside, talking to the building manager. Tall, broad shoulders, wedding ring. She turned back to me. "Don't," she said under her breath, just as I opened my mouth. The man came in. His eyes passed over me like I was furniture, but his hand rested on her shoulder for just a second too long. "Sorry I'm late," he told her. His voice was warm, familiar, the kind you don't earn in a week. She introduced him as Daniel. "My friend." The hesitation was microscopic, but I caught it. He nodded at me politely, then glanced toward the elevator. "Ready?" She looked at me for half a second longer than she should have. "In a minute." Daniel left without pressing. When the door shut behind him, she let out a breath like she'd been holding it since he walked in. "He's my ex," she said quickly, eyes still on the floor. "We still talk sometimes." I wanted to ask why, but the word stuck. Instead, I just said, "You didn't have to explain." "Yes," she murmured. "I did." The elevator dinged. She stepped inside, motioned for me to join her. The space was small, the hum of the old machinery loud enough to make silence feel closer. She stood in the corner, arms crossed, but her eyes kept finding mine, even when she looked away. At the 3rd floor, the elevator jolted, sudden, sharp, before shuddering to a stop. Her hand went to the wall. Mine went to hers. Instinct. Neither of us moved. The light above flickered once, twice, then steadied. But we didn't pull away. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. Her voice was thin, but not because she meant it any less. "You are," I said. Her fingers tightened just slightly, like she was testing how it felt. A buzz came from her phone. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and turned it face down without answering. I caught the name, Daniel. The elevator lurched back into motion. She let go, but slowly, like every second mattered. When the doors opened, she stepped out first, but stopped halfway down the hall and turned. "I'm not looking for this," she said, almost to herself. "Neither am I," I replied, though the way my voice caught made it sound like a lie. She didn't move for a moment. Then she said, "You left the light on the other night." And just like that, she walked away that I hadn't seen her in 4 days. For days of footsteps in the hallway that weren't hers, of glancing at my door when I heard a knock that never came. 4 days of replaying that elevator moment until I could almost feel her hand again. It was late when I finally saw her. Outside, sitting alone on the low wall by the parking lot, a coffee in her hands even though the air was warm. She didn't notice me at first. Or maybe she did and didn't care. I walked over. "You avoiding me?" Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "I've been busy." "Too busy to say hello?" I tried to keep it light, but it came out sharper than I meant. She sipped her coffee, didn't answer. Something in my chest tightened. Was he here? That got her attention. "What?" "Daniel," I said, the name tasting like something bitter. She set her cup down beside her. "You think this is about him?" "I don't know what this is about." "You disappear." "You." I stopped, shaking my head. "Forget it." Her voice was low, steady. "You're not the only one who gets to feel something, you know. And I don't get to be careless with mine." For a moment, neither of us moved. The sound of cars passing on the street felt far away. "You think I'm careless?" I asked. "I think," she said, finally looking at me, "you don't realize how close you are to making this something you can't walk away from." "I already can't." The words came out before I could pull them back. She blinked, like I'd just stepped over a line she'd drawn in her head. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Her hands curled into the edge of the wall, knuckles pale. Because if you say it, I'll believe you. And then I'll have to. She stopped, pressing her lips together hard. Have to what? I asked, my voice low. She stood, close enough that I could see the small tremor in her jaw. Don't make me choose. Between what and what? She didn't say. I stepped forward, the space between us now thin enough that her breath touched my cheek. Maybe you already have. Her eyes searched mine, not like she was looking for an answer, more like she was deciding whether she could survive it. The air between us felt heavy, waiting. Then, somewhere behind us, the building door slammed. Footsteps approached, quick and getting closer. She didn't step back. I didn't either. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, just for a second, before she turned her head sharply toward the sound. The footsteps belonged to my upstairs neighbor, Mark, the kind of guy who always had earbuds in and smelled faintly of paint thinner. He passed us without a glance, heading toward the dumpster. But as he went, I caught the smallest flick of his eyes toward her, then toward me. The next morning, I understood why. She knocked on my door just after sunrise. Not the soft, testing knock from before. This was harder, rushed. When I opened it, her face was pale, eyes sharp. We need to talk. I stepped aside. She came in, moving quickly, like if she stopped she'd lose her nerve. Mark saw us last night, she said. And this morning, he told Daniel. The name hit me like a punch. Why would he? Because he thinks he knows what's going on. Her voice wavered. And maybe he's not wrong. I ran a hand through my hair. So? He's your ex. What's he going to do? Send me a warning text? Her jaw tightened. Daniel's not just my ex. We're still legally married. The words sank in like cold water. You're married, I said, slowly, as if repeating it would make it feel less like a betrayal. It's complicated. She sat on the edge of my bed, staring at her hands. We've been separated for over a year. We don't live together, but we haven't finished it. And he still thinks that you're his. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. She looked up at me then, eyes wet but steady. That I'm not yours. The silence after that was thick enough to choke on. I wanted to ask her why she hadn't told me. I wanted to yell, or maybe laugh at how stupid this all was. But instead, I just said, so what now? You disappear again. She stood, closing the space between us. I came here to tell you before you heard it from someone else. And what difference does that make? It makes a difference to me, she said, her voice low, urgent. Because I don't want to lie to you. Not about this. Not about anything. There it was again. That pull. That thing between us that didn't care about paperwork or gossip or footsteps in the hall. But this time, something in me hesitated. She must have seen it, because she stepped back, just slightly. I'll understand if you don't want. I still want, I said, before she could finish. The truth came out like a confession. Her eyes closed briefly, like she was letting herself breathe for the first time. But when they opened, there was fear in them too. From outside, a knock echoed through the hallway, sharp, impatient. She froze. I already knew who it was. The knock didn't stop. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 3 more. She stood in the middle of my room, eyes darting between the door and me, like she was calculating the least damaging move. Don't answer it, she said, her voice low but tight. Another knock, harder this time. I walked to the door anyway. Through the peephole, Daniel. He didn't look angry. That was worse. He looked calm, like he'd already decided how this conversation was going to go. I opened the door halfway. We should talk, he said, glancing past me to where she stood. All of us. My pulse kicked up. About what? He gave me a look like I'd just told a child's lie. You know about what? Behind me, she said. Daniel, stop. Her voice was soft, but it carried. He ignored her. Do you think she's going to choose you? His tone wasn't cruel, it was curious. Like he was asking about the weather. Something in me snapped. Maybe she already did. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through. She stepped forward, placing herself between us. This isn't about choosing, she said. Not between you two. Not like that. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then what is it? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I realized she'd been carrying two different fears, losing him in the wrong way and losing me at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. It's about me not living in the middle anymore. Daniel's eyes flicked over her face, searching for something. Then he stepped back. Then I'll leave you to it. No raised voice, no slammed door, just quiet footsteps down the hall. The moment he was gone, the room felt smaller, heavier. I looked at her. So where does that leave us? She met my gaze. You're asking if I'm scared? Yeah, I am, she said, without flinching. But I'm more scared of not finding out what this could be. Something in my chest broke open at that. I stepped closer. Then we find out. Her hand came up, brushing against my cheek. The touch was light, but the meaning behind it wasn't. For a moment, everything else, the gossip, the paper she handed me that first day, Daniel's knock, it all fell away. We didn't kiss. Not yet. It was almost worse than if we had, because now I knew we both wanted it and were choosing to wait. The kind of wait that isn't distance, it's a promise. She let her hand drop, but her eyes stayed on mine. You know this isn't going to be easy. I don't want easy, I said. She smiled, the first unguarded smile I'd seen from her. Good. The clock on my desk ticked once, loud in the quiet that a week passed before I saw her again. It wasn't avoidance this time. Life just happened. Work shifts stretched late into the night for me. She had end-of-term grades to finish, her voice trailing through the stairwell once when I caught her talking to a parent on the phone. But I thought about her every day. When the knock finally came, it was the same soft, testing knock from that first afternoon. I opened the door, and there she was, hair a little wind-tossed, a faint line between her brows that hadn't been there before. You left something, she said, holding out an envelope. Then, with that same half-beat pause, or maybe you meant to. I smiled despite myself. Deja vu. Not quite, she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite her. She set the envelope on my desk. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I asked, Daniel? We talked, she said. Really talked this time. And she met my eyes. It's over. Not the polite kind of over. The real kind. I nodded slowly, letting the weight of that settle. Her gaze softened. He wasn't the thing keeping me away from you. Fear was. And now? I asked. Her shoulders lifted in the smallest shrug. Still afraid. But it doesn't feel bigger than wanting to be here. The envelope sat between us, quiet and still. What's in it? I asked. She smiled. That unguarded, real smile I'd only seen once before. Something that found me when I was ready. I slid a finger under the flap, pulling out a single sheet of paper. Neat handwriting. Some things find you when you stop running. I looked up at her. You wrote the first one, didn't you? She didn't answer directly. Just stepped closer, close enough for her perfume to thread through the air between us. My pulse kicked up, the same way it had that day in the elevator, except this time I didn't hold still. I reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate. There wasn't a grand speech, no perfectly lit kiss scene. Just the two of us standing in my small, slightly messy room, hands clasped like we were both holding on to something fragile but worth the risk. Her thumb brushed over mine once, slow. So, she said, are you going to invite me to sit down, or do we just stand here until someone else starts knocking? I laughed, quiet but real. Stay as long as you want. She did. The sun dipped lower outside, shadows stretching across the room, wrapping us in that kind of warm light that feels like it's been waiting for you. And for the first time, I didn't wonder what came next. I just knew we'd find out together.